Hello, I am Carrie Waterton,
And I'm Sightless Combat.
and this is our talk Project Black Cat Sightless Stealth System. So, firstly, who are we and what are we doing here?
Well, as I said, I'm Sightless Combat. Feel free to call me Sightless Combat or SK, any of those three. I'm doubtless a familiar face to probably many of you here, given I've done a few GA-Conf presentations in the past. I am a gamer without sights, content creator, accessibility consultant, and most recently, accessible gaming officer for Royal National Institute of Blind People, that is RNIB, the UK-based sight loss charity. And I do stream on Twitch. I create videos for YouTube. I write content for my website, accessibility reviews and things. And I've consulted on numerous games over the years. And you may have even seen me in the credits of a few recent games, including God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, and very recently in the credits for Sea of Thieves, of all things. So, yeah, as for what I mean by a gamer without sight, I use the term because legal blindness, which is often just shortened to being blind, can and often does include usable and or residual vision, which I've never had. So just to clear things up, I cannot see anything at all, which is kind of why this project is so important, but we'll come on to that later.
Absolutely. And I am Carrie, as I've said. I am the Senior Accessibility Designer at Rebellion, and I've been at this job for just over a year, and before that I worked in UX design in an indie studio, and I am an advocate for accessibility. I'm passionate about making games as many people as possible can play, and that is one of the things that is most fulfilling about my job, is it actually helps people to play games, and that's really kind of cool. So our project is called Project Black Cat. That's BLACKKAT. We chose Project Black Cat because we both like cats. I have a black cat called Toothless, and we chose to have K as the start of the cat as a reference to Sightless Combat. So we're gathered here today to talk to you a bit about Project Black Cat, which is our prototype. It's a personal project of ours, and it is a fully accessible prototype gameplay experience for blind and low vision players. We'll chat about the project's origins, the purpose and goals, and its ongoing development process, as well as the challenges that we faced and the wins that we've achieved so far. Our entire goal of this is to share our findings and help to demystify blind and low vision accessibility, potentially motivating you to start your own prototypes as well.
So for me, I've always wanted to make prototypes to show developers, friends, or anyone else who's bothered about it, and try and bring ideas that I've had in my head for years in some cases to fruition just to see if they actually work. However, game engines and programming languages and all sorts of development tools don't offer the intuitive mechanisms I need to actually get started with the process in any part, in any way, in a timely manner at the very least. After a fun several games of Hearthstone alongside Carrie, as well as trying to analyze Sniper Elite and things like Metal Hellsinger via a co-pilot setup, or at least a co-pilot style setup, we got to talking about the whole prototype situation and the idea of creating a sort of vertical slice, so a tiny piece of what would be a full game, just to illustrate a few interesting ways to utilize audio to convey things that really, a lot of people don't think about. In this case, things like stealth.
Exactly. So the high-level goal for this project was to be a prototype which showcases stealth, combat, and a bit of world navigation that is accessible to players without sight in a third-person stealth shooter genre. Maybe a little bit Sniper Elite-esque, maybe. But a player without sight would be able to launch and complete the demo in full without any sighted assistance. So in summary, those goals are fully blind accessible stealth gameplay, fully blind accessible combat, fully blind accessible level navigation, and fully blind accessible onboarding for the above suite of mechanics. So to help keep us on track with the prototype and make sure that we didn't go out of scope or end up with too much to do, we put together a list of things that we would definitely include, could potentially include with time, and some things that we absolutely weren't going to do. So things that we would cover would include things like the basic combat system, enemy AI, tutorials. Things we're not going to cover are things like an inventory or dialogue and narrative. And the secondary things that we could try to include if we had enough time would be things like controller remapping, ammo management, and haptics.
So, with the goals and our clear scope, we were able to get started. Shortly after writing all our ideas down in a series of absolutely huge looking documents, we found, much like in any Dark Souls game or similar, our first boss fight, if you will, in the form of menu narration. I've always said that menu narration is not only a basic accessibility feature to have implemented, though, as you'll soon see, I'm not saying that it's not complicated to do, but I've also said that it's one of the most crucial ones to have implemented. After all, without the menus being accessible, how are you supposed to set the game up to meet your needs or navigate to things like inventories or, skill trees or cosmetic shops, where applicable, without needing constant sighted assistance and having to say every 5 minutes, oh, can you come and help me with this menu because it's not narrated? Oh, good Lord. If you just hear blip, 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 blip whenever you enter a game, then just trying to move around, it can be very, very confusing and frustrating, particularly if said menus wrap, i.e. they go from top to bottom to top to bottom to top to bottom, infinitely scrolling into the ether. Having narration can solve this problem, as instead of just hearing blip, blip, blip and having to count those various UI sound effects and how many options you need to move around to get to a certain place, you can just hear where you are and thus, and have done, thus reducing, any cognitive load as well and simplifying the whole process in general. And with games having so many options, as, you might see, even with accessibility menus, it might just make things a whole lot easier. Moreover, definitely have adjustable speech rate when you're trying to implement narration. If you haven't seen my YouTube short that I put up recently that compares the speeds that people think I read at to the speeds I generally use on a daily basis, that might be a good place to see just how different the perception is. Hi everyone, I'm Sightless Combat. This is the speed most people think I read at.
If you're reading video game text at this speed, it can take you much longer to get the information you need than it would for a sighted person just reading the text.
And this is the speed I generally read at.
I've used a screen reader at speeds like this for years, so I'm much more comfortable processing information at this pace. It also means that I can find information I want more quickly.
Could you understand what was said? Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think it was. And if you want to see more videos like this, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And as you can tell, I know it's a tongue-in-cheek example, but it gets the point across that being able to have that information as close to hand or ear, I suppose, as possible is a brilliant asset to have. And that's all part of customizability being a key component of accessibility. This was one of many points that Carrie and I raised in those long hours of discussions as we started to put the pieces of the prototype together.
Absolutely. So after these initial chats with SK, I decided to boot up Unreal and get some generic systems working. Like we said, menu narration was the first challenge. It was going to be a big integral system that I didn't want to retrofit later on, and having never worked with it before, I wanted to make sure that I understood fully how it worked and be able to plan for that intuitive and robust narration system that would allow for things like the speed adjustments. So I knew that Unreal Engine 4 had some experimental screen reader support, and as that would configure to the user's existing settings with their screen readers, I thought that that was a pretty good option. So I downloaded NVDA and found their documentation really easy to understand and really intuitive. But sadly, as I began to look over the Unreal 4 documentation, I found it lacking clarity. What was a console variable configuration? Where in the file was I supposed to paste that in to the accessibility variable? After a lot of Googling and pestering some programmer friends, I dug deeper for tutorials. I got really lost. I found a stream and a handy transcript where I could control find the results for Screen Reader, but unfortunately the stream mentioned it a few times and said that it was a bit tricky to implement, but never actually covered how to implement it. Similarly, in Unreal Engine 4's Introduction to Accessibility course on their learning page, the module didn't actually go through the steps to implement or show it working. When I downloaded the associated project files and turned on accessibility for the button it suggested in the tutorial, it still didn't work. I was at this point slightly frustrated, as you may can imagine. I turned to Twitter for help, and in the meantime, I began downloading Unreal Engine 5. Unreal 5 had new experimental features, like a built-in text-to-speech plugin which handled the vocalization within the engine, not touching screen readers. So after following Unreal's much clearer tutorial for the TTS system in Unreal Engine 5, I found that it still wasn't working. Frustrated still, I stole my partner's laptop, I downloaded Unreal Engine 5 a second time, I tested my project, I built a new project following the tutorial, and neither worked. So it seemed that this tech was also either faulty or not documented clearly. So I turned back to Twitter. Some of the devs from Epic and Unreal had been amazing and gracious enough to try and help, and when I let them know about the Unreal 5 issue, they confirmed that actually, you're right, it wasn't working and it should have been. So at this point, it was about 4 hours after I had first opened this project. I wanted to get a button to say button, and I hadn't been able to do that in 4 hours with 2 different engines and 2 different systems. So I was a little bit tired at this point. So my final port of call was ReadSpeaker, which is a text-to-speech service that has an Unreal and Unity plugin and is currently used by companies like Splash Damage. So my fear with this would be the price tag. As an independent on day 1 of prototyping, my budget is nil but my time. And also, as we kind of discussed, this is a knowledge sharing project. It's a passion project. We weren't looking to make any profit from this at all. So in the meantime, I was holding out hope for Unreal Engine fixing their native system in Unreal 5. The thing that shocked me the most is how unapproachable narration was. I had spent 4 hours trying to get one button to be read aloud, and I tried 2 systems and 2 engines that didn't work for me, one of which was poorly documented. And this is no disrespect to Epic, of course. It's sometimes systems break, and the people who replied to my tweet were absolutely lovely and really helpful. It was just frustrating that making something accessible, and that was kind of presented as being straightforward, wasn't at all. In order to support devs, especially indie developers who may lack the resources to dedicate to making or buying bespoke systems like this, engine-side support is one of the best solutions. Accessibility is for everyone, and we need to make sure that it's approachable for all kinds of developers so that more games can be made more playable by a wider range of people. So back to ReadSpeaker. I initially got in touch and explained about the prototype and what we were trying to achieve. Thankfully, they seemed really interested, and I had a really great call with Tom from ReadSpeaker, who basically said, look, we don't yet have a demo to go out with our plugin, but it's on our wish list. Could we use part of your prototype, and in exchange, we'll give you access to the license for the TTS? This was probably the best news that I could have had. They were super friendly, super approachable, really happy to help, and it was no skin off my nose to help them with a demo for ReadSpeaker. I was going to be doing a lot of the same things that they would want in their demo, so why not spend time making something that people can learn from? I mean, this was the whole purpose of the project, to help people learn. So it aligned really well with our prototype goals already, and meant that we had access to a TTS. Anyone who watched the Games Accessibility Conference Awards will see a clip of me where I am incredibly jet-lagged, and I say, the ReadSpeaker plugin is like Skyrim, it just works. And that's because it genuinely was. After 4 hours of trying to get a button to say button with Unreal's native systems, just downloading the plugin from ReadSpeaker, plugging it in, and then it just working, it was such a relief. It was amazing. So now I had a working TTS, and this was excellent. I was able to play around with the settings, figure out how to adjust the speed and the pitch and the volume, and then I was also able to set up effective ways of reading out buttons using some of the really great guidelines on the Xbox accessibility guidelines about narrating menus in a really helpful way.
Moving on from menus though, stealth and audio are two things that seem like they go particularly well together, at the very least. After all, you are sneaking around, and enemies can hear you. And given you're trying to be as quiet as possible, which is usually the objective, you can theoretically hear them as well. But a key part of most, if not all, stealth games is not what enemies are listening to, but unfortunately what they're looking at. Rendering where characters are physically looking, you might think, was a difficult task, but it turned out that a solution was already present in a way, but from an unlikely source. If you've ever played a turn-based strategy game like Gears Tactics, for instance, another splash damage related reference, you'll know that there are cones of vision, if you like, or at the very least, just cones in general for things like abilities like Overwatch. No, not that Overwatch, the other one. These ability cones project out in front of enemies or player characters who are producing these abilities, and show, for example, what radius an ability will encompass, thereby allowing you to see whether an enemy will hit it if they decide to so much as blink an eyelid. After realizing how this worked and remembering that it existed, not just for strategy games, but also other experiences in terms of other stealth games, where the AI was essentially blind if you were behind them and they didn't realize, but had an area of vision where they would, for lack of a better term, see you and detect you if you entered it. The idea seemed, at least at that point, relatively simple. Render these cones in an auditory format along with where characters were facing. Having objects placed in front of or behind the player character is one thing, as you can just change frequencies or pitch or volume or anything to show that an object is behind a player, to be, distinct therein. And whether you're directly facing an object or whether you need to do a 180. However, detailing that a character that isn't you is looking off towards a different direction is an entirely different puzzle, and was slightly trickier until we realized the following. Each character could have a base layer of sound that plays at all times, indicating, when the character is moving, when they've stopped, etc., or just where they are in general. On top of this base layer, though, what do you think you'd hear if a character was actually facing you? That's right, breathing. Using this to our advantage, the theory was that we'd have breathing cues only play when the character's cone of vision was aiming towards you, changing in volume depending on, how close to directly the line of sight was. Testing this out was one of the many fun parts of the iterative process. Seeing everything play out in real time and have it work was actually quite satisfying, because having the theory in your head is one thing, but being able to realize it and then also have, audio cues for objects that you can hide in and, then run out as the enemy walks away and continue to stealth to your heart's content is actually brilliant fun. It is genuinely so enjoyable. In addition, of course, you've got things like cues for, when you're spotted and when you're hiding and when, enemies are sort of partly alerted, but they haven't quite figured out where you are yet or what that strange noise was. And being able to pull that off in, a relatively short time and have a build up and running, even with very basic graphics, was an absolute brilliant start to the prototyping process. Of course, that's not to say we didn't find a few fun bugs. But that's half of the enjoyment, really, of testing, at least in my opinion. Breaking things and then seeing them resolved and then having them work as intended It's always good fun to go in, have a game suddenly crash, realize that it's crashed, and be like, oh, because I stepped on this, that's why it crashed. And then seeing it fixed in the next build. But along with all the custom theory crafting that we managed to do, what about a smaller aspect of accessibility that is often overlooked? Just putting things into the game that work on their own, or inherent accessibility.
Absolutely. First of all, painting my programming in an excellent light there. Thank you very much. That's very accurate. I am not a programmer. But yeah, there were some really great moments during development where things happened unexpectedly. So for me, this was to do with the player bumping into a wall. I didn't have a wall collision sound in for the first build, and it was on my list of, oh, I need to have that. But then when I watched Sightless play, he was turning when he was colliding with a wall, and I was kind of shocked. I said, how did you know that you'd hit a wall? And he just said the footsteps stopped. It was a really obvious thing that, looking back on it, it totally took me by surprise. The absence of sound can be just as informative as the presence of it. Just like we were talking about with the directional breathing. When there is no directional breathing, you know that you are not in the vision cone. So, of course, we have enhanced the collisions with sound now, particularly so someone without sight can tell if they're moving alongside a wall. But it was a really great little design thing to come across unexpectedly as we were developing the prototype. So, talking about future plans and collaboration. As we developed the prototype, I realized that we'd need better sounds. SK is able to produce amazing scores and do some voice acting, but for the range of sound effects we were after, free sound effects just weren't going to cut it. This was an audio-based system, and me hacking together some free and sourced online things was probably not the best solution. So I put out a call to Abertay University with a student brief and quickly heard back from James Conroy, a fourth-year student specialising in audio and currently designing a blind accessible game for his honours project. James has been amazing at providing sounds for us to use according to our briefs, and SK and I have been providing feedback for the honours project in return.
Speaking of feedback, and more feedback. A key aim of Project Black Cat, as we've said before, is to be able to offer usable and working tweakable implementations of features and infrastructure to achieve accessibility, including for gamers without sight, who are historically, just underserved when it comes to mainstream content that can be played alongside or, as part of the same discussions with sighted peers, i.e. those with full vision or any other level of vision, to be honest. What better way to accomplish this goal, though, than to test said features and infrastructure than with people, than at least in future, with more gamers without sight and gamers with other levels of vision as well, to make sure that, should anyone else want to implement these features into their own projects, independent or otherwise, the implementations will have been fully, put through their paces and be robust enough to work. One of our biggest pillars for this prototype is, of course, knowledge sharing, which is exactly what this talk is all about. On top of the talk, though, of course, we have a website where we will be posting developer diaries, build reviews, videos and links to anything we do for the project, and access, of course, to download the prototype when it's ready. No, we are not setting a release date, at least not yet. And then delay it several times afterwards for a laugh. No. The website, if you're curious to look at it now in its current state, is projectblackcat.com. So projectblackkat.com.
Thanks for listening to our talk. Shortly, we'll finish off with a video of the prototype where it's currently at. But before then, we want to thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, grab us in person at GAConf or drop a question into the GAConf Discord and we'll reply as soon as we can. If everything has gone to plan, then I will have been outside not watching myself doing this talk and hopefully replying to your questions on the Discord.
As for contact details, if you want to get a hold of me, you can do so on Twitter, Twitch, and on YouTube as Sightless Combat, SIGHTLESSKOMBAT, or via my website at www.sightlesscombat.com. Also, you can email RNIB at gaming@rnib.org.uk for any information on any of their endeavours, including, you know, current and future research or other opportunities as well.
And if you want to stay in touch with anything that I'm up to, the best place to follow me is on Twitter. That's at Carrie Waterton. So that's at CARIWATTERTON. And my name is Carrie Watermelon on there.
It is always a pleasure to be here at GAConf, and I'm really glad to be able to say that I'm attending in person again this year. And as Carrie said, feel free to find us both in person for any questions you might have around these ventures that we've discussed today, or anything else in terms of accessibility. And remember, keep a lookout for any updates and things through projectblackcat.com. And with that being said, here's the moment you've all been waiting for, that being a run of the prototype itself. Thank you very much, GAConf, and enjoy!
Welcome to Project Black Cat. This prototype was created by Carrie Waterton and Sightless Combat. Main menu options, button 1 of 5, A to select.
Hello everyone, I am Sightless Combat. Welcome to this demo of Project Black Cat, a vertical slice currently in very early development, showcasing not only stealth gameplay but melee elements as well later on, and other mechanics that we have yet to develop in the future that we have ideas for, to create a more accessible and immersive experience for various types of gameplay and illustrate just how the mechanics could be implemented even on a smaller indie basis in our particular case. So as a gamer without sight, the big thing here is narrative menus that we start off with.
Audio glossary, button 2 of 5, A to select.
And if you're thinking that narration speed is a little slow,
Options,
let's go back up to
button 1
options.
of 5, A to select.
I'm using an Xbox One controller, Xbox Series controller I should say.
Options menu, narrator volume slider 40%, 1 narrator speed slider 25%,
So if you want to turn that up,
35%. Narrator pitch slider 50%, 3
Yep,
of 3.
there we go.
D-pad left or right to adjust B to go back.
so it's telling me what I can press to adjust things.
Options button 1 of 5, audio glossary button 2 of 5.
So we have the
8 to select.
glossary.
Play button 3 of 5, 8 credits button 4 of 5. Quit button 5 of credit. Play audio glossary.
And let's go
button,
to audio
2 of 5,
glossary.
8. Audio glossary interact cue and audio cue that plays when an interact. A prompt is active button 1 of.
So we're pressing A to play these. So that means we can interact with, well, an interactive object.
Stealth kill cue and audio cue that plays when a takedown cue. A prompt is active button.
So that's where we can get a stealth kill.
Spotted cue and audio cue that plays when the player is noticed by an enemy button 3.
Yep, that means they've seen you, run! Or hide.
Hidden cue and audio cue that plays when an enemy loses awareness of the player button 4 of 5.
That's when it's like, okay, it's safe, I can make my next move.
A passive spatial audio cue for crates which the player can hide in button 5 of 5. 8 of.
And that's kind of quiet, but it is there. There is a crate queue.
Audio glossary button 2 of 5. Options button 1 of 5. A to select.
So let's dive into the game, and
play button
the game
3
will
of 5,
tutorialize
select.
elements of this.
Use left stick to move.
Okay, so we're going to do as the game says.
A long, cold corridor extends before you. Slightly ahead to the right is a wooden crate. At the end of the corridor, you see it turns sharply to the right.
So we have audio description built into the game itself.
This crate could be a good place to hide. Press A to hide when near crates.
So that interact queue came up, so we can hide. If you listen closely, you'll hear footsteps. Let's get out and move forward.
A guard patrols ahead. You have no weapons, but he has a knife on his belt. See if you can sneak up behind him and take him out with his knife. Press A when behind an enemy to perform a takedown.
So what we're going to try and do is move back to the crate, like so. We're going to wait for him to come along in the distance. He's on his patrol route. He's coming back. So we're going to wait here. And we're going to go out of the crate Run up. Oh, we might not get there. We're going to turn. And there was that stealth cue. So that guard is now dead.